So in today's video, we are going to build this beautiful calculator using only HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So as you can see, this calculator going to perform so many operations such as addition. So let's do this addition. Like if I'm going to add 78 and 6, so we get a valid output. And if I'm going to click on this del button, so it will going to delete the last value like this, and this AC button will going to delete all the output that has been shown in our output box. And as you can see, we do have lots of operators, so we can perform a lots of calculation. And the best part is that this project is going to be completely beginner friendly. So if you are learning web development, you will be understand every line of code, because we are going to build everything from scratch. So without wasting any more time, let's get started. Okay, so let's start by structuring of our HTML. So firstly, we're going to create a boilerplate. Then let's give a title, which is going to be our calculator. Then we're also going to link our CSS file. So let's link this, which is going to be style.css. And also we're going to link our JavaScript file, so that we're going to add functionality later on this video. So let's use a script tag, which is going to be this, and rc, where we're going to put our script.js. Yes. Okay, so as we can see in this calculator, we have this calculator inside a box, right? So basically, firstly, we're going to create a box, right? So for that, let's create a div, and I'm gonna name a box called calculator. So we have a calculator class, and inside that, what we have this input box, right? So let's create this. So we're going to create this input box. So put text, and we're also going to give them ID, which we're going to use in our JavaScript. So I'm gonna give them display, right? And one more thing is read only. Read only means user will not going to interact by typing on this input box, right? User will only going to interact by typing on these buttons. So that is why we're going to use this read only, right, in our input box, because we are creating this input box as a display box. That is why. Now we have buttons, right? After display box, we have a buttons. So let's create a buttons box, buttons class, and inside this button, we do have these lots of buttons. So let's create this button. Look at this input box. Right now we do have this only input box, but we also need some buttons. So let's create this. So right now, firstly, we have this AC button, then we have this del button. So let's use button tag, and inside that, we're going to give a C. Let's see, have an AC button. Then we have a del button. Now next, what we have an AC, then we have del button, right? We're going to create del button. Then next we have percentage divide. We're going to add numbers, which is going to be our 7, then 8. Look at, yes, 7 divide. Okay. So this is how we have created all the buttons that we actually need in our calculator. Then I'm also giving, because we also going to add JavaScript later on in this video, so I'm just going to give that when the user will going to click on this button, what will happen is on click, we're going to call a function. We're going to here display, right? It will going to create display. Then if the user will going to click on this, so we'll again going to give them on click, and it will going to be delete last. Let's give it delete last, right? So similarly, we'll also going to provide on click, then the function that we're going to use in our JavaScript. So let's do this. Inside this, I'm going to call add value function. So let's do this. Add value, right? And inside this, we need to add these values actually. And after this, at the end, we also have this equal to button, right? So we're also going to create this button. All right. So here you can see our HTML structure is now ready. We have these all the buttons that we actually did in our calculator and this display box, right? So I think it doesn't look very attractive yet because we haven't written any CSS. So let's fix this out by adding some CSS, style them. Okay, so firstly we're going to remove all the default margin and padding. So let's select a universal selector and we're going to give margin, which is going to be 0. Then padding, which is going to be 0. Here we can, yes. Now, yes, the box sizing, which is going to be our border box. And also let's decide our font family. So the font family, I'm going to give some Arial type of font. So now have, okay. Now next, we're going to work upon body. So body, let's select the body. Then as we know, we're going to put our calculator at the center. So we're going to use display flex. So display, it will going to flex. Then horizontally and vertically align them center. So we're going to use justify content center. Then we're going to align item center. Then the height is going to be full screen, which is going to be 100 viewport height. And also let's give a background. I'm going to give a background bit of whitish color so that our calculator stands out. So we have this, I have already selected one of the color, this one. Here we can see. Okay. Now next we have this calculator container. So let's move inside our calculator container. We're going to select this class, calculator. Inside this, let's give a background white. Then also we're going to give a padding, which is going to be 20 pixel. Then we're going to give a box shadow, which is going to be 0. Then we have pixel and RGB, which is going to cover 0, 0, 0. Alright, let's see. Then we have border radius, which is going to be give it 12 pixels. Okay, let's select our display ID. Display. So, and let's give them width, which is going to be our 100 pixel. The height, I'm going to give 60 pixel. Margin bottom, let's give a margin from bottom, which is our 50 pixel. Then let's remove this border. Background is going to be whitish type. And then we have, I'm also going to give a border radius, which is going to be, let's give it 8 pixel. And we're also going to do the text align at the right, because in calculator anything, so it will going to align at the right side. This is why we're going to text align right. Then font size, going to give it 24 pixel, and also we're going to give padding, which is going to be 10 pixel. Yes. Now let's come upon to our button. So inside our button, because in button, as you can see, we have this 4 columns. So I'm going to use a grid CSS. So let's give it a display grid. Then we have 4 columns, right? So let's create them. So we're going to give grid template column. Then we have repeat 4 columns and each of 70 pixels. And one more thing, we'll also give a gap that is going to be 10 pixels. Okay, now let's come to our button. So we're going to use our button tag. Yes, and inside this, let's give them height, which is going to be our 60 pixel. Then we're going to remove our border, which is going to be none. Let's see. Yes. Yes. All right. Then we're going to give a border radius. Let's give 8 pixel. And after that, let's give them a background. I'm going to give, I have already selected one background, which is going to, yes, this is what the color of our button. Then we're going to give a color called white to our text. Then font size, I'm going to increase our font size, which is going to be 20 pixel. Then also cursor is going to be now. And when we hover on a button, so look in this calculator, when we're hovering on a button, so it will show a bit of darkish color. We're also going to add this functionality, so which is going to be button colon hover. So we're going to change the background, so the background is going to be a bit of darkish one. So it is going to have tab, this one. So when we're going to hover on each button, it will show a darkish color. Then we have one equal button, right, which is missing. And this equal button is also spanning these two rows together, right? Okay, so let's select equal. Then we're going to give a grid column. We're going to span two columns, right? Span, then, and also we're going to give a background greenish color. I have one color, which is going to be like this. Yes, so we have our equal to button, but it's showing a darkish color when we hover on this button. So let's change this. So we hover, so now our calculator looks much better. But if I click on any one of the button, nothing happens because we haven't written any JavaScript. So let's go with our JavaScript. So this is what the CSS is. And so as we know, we have to display everything on that input box. So firstly, I'm going to select that input box which having ID, which is display. Okay, so let's select this. Select display equals to have document dot get element by ID, which is going to be our display ID. Okay, then we're going to add that function, which is going to be our, I think, add value function. So it's going to create this function. So function is add value. Inside this, we're going to pass value. What will happen? It will going to append the value right on our display. So display dot value plus equal to value. Okay, then what we have, I think we have a clear display function. We're going to create a function. We're going to make clear display. So when the user will going to click on this button, so display will going display value will going to change to empty. Now next what we have a delete function last. So the user will going to click on this, we're going to say dot value, because we need to delete the last value, so we're going to use a slice function. So display dot value, basically we are just slicing the value, right? Slice, so it will going to slice or delete the last value. Okay, the main part, that we need to call the calculate function, that when the user will going to click on this equal to button, so we're going to call this calculate function. So let's create this function. calculate, and for example I'm going to write inside catch, try and catch, because if the user will going to click on any invalid operators or anything that is not valid to a calculator, so it will not going to crash our website, it will going to display only error. So that is why we're going to use try catch. We're going to give display dot value going to be, so this E will going to calculate a valid answer. So we're going to give display dot value. Here our answer is going to be calculated. Then inside our catch, if the user going to input some invalid keywords, so we're going to simply display error. So it will going to display dot value equals to error. All right, so we have done with a JavaScript, and test our calculator. So let's add some number. Yes, one, delete. Then we're going to 89. One. Yes, and let's do multiplication. The AC button is also working. Going to divide by. So yes, so we get a decimal value. So congratulations, we have successfully built our modern calculator using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So I think that's all for today's video. I hope you learned something new, and also the complete source code and live link are available in our description box. So feel free to check them out, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.